64th birthday. We celebrate today a lot more than just Aung San Suu Kyi's birthday. We celebrate the courage of a woman who has spent the last 13 of the last 19 years under house arrest. We celebrate the courage of a woman who has stood up against the world's most brutal, most horrendous military dictatorship for 19 years and has refused to yield to the pressure that has been put upon her. We celebrate the courage of a woman who, despite being incarcerated in her own home for 13 years and the last 19 years, continues to show leadership not only to the women of Burma, not only to the men of Burma, but to the people of the world. A woman who, under appalling conditions, has become a beacon of hope to the oppressed people of the world. No matter where they are, they understand that there is one woman who stands up alone and often deserted by the rest of the world and says human rights matter, democracy matters, freedom matters, and it cannot be extinguished, no matter how brutal, no matter how appalling the dictatorship, no matter how repressive. The spirit of humanity cannot be in any way quenched when you have people like Aung San Suu Kyi who stand up for you and for me and for every person on this planet. Aung San Suu Kyi, more than ever before, faces a challenge on this birthday. She faces the challenge of a show trial. It's a measure of a dictatorship, how far they are prepared to go to oppress their opposition. And in the case of Aung San Suu Kyi, they've gone to the extreme of making themselves look even more ridiculous in the eyes of the international community. I must say, I didn't think it was possible to make the military dictatorship in Burma look more stupid and more laughable than they are now. But it's possible, and they've done it. They've set up a framing of Aung San Suu Kyi, a show trial, and there's a reason why they've done it. And the reason can be worked out from the words of the Deputy Foreign Minister, Mong Mint, who said at an ASEAN European Union Ministers meeting that Suu Kyi's trial was, quote, an internal legal issue. This is a key bit. It is not political, it is not a human rights issue, so we don't accept pressure and interference from abroad. When the Burmese military dictatorship says something is not political, they mean it is political. When they say something is not a human rights issue, they mean it is a human rights issue. You can be guaranteed that everybody who is paying attention around the world knows that this is a show trial. It's a show trial in the great tradition of Joseph Stalin. It's a show trial in the great tradition of Adolf Hitler. It's a show trial in the great tradition of the Burmese military dictatorship. And this show trial is designed for one purpose only. It is to ensure that Aung San Suu Kyi is not available for next year's elections, that her voice for freedom, her voice for democracy, her voice for national reconciliation is silenced in October of next year when the elections are held. It is a measure of how powerful Aung San Suu Kyi is. It's a measure of how powerful the women of Burma are. It is a measure of how powerful the strength of commitment to democracy in Burma is. But they have to resort to this level to make sure that she is not a voice during that election. Even though the Constitution is totally rigged, no matter who the Burmese people vote for, the military will get back into power. Even though you can be guaranteed the ballot itself will be rigged. This military dictatorship feels it's essential to completely silence Aung San Suu Kyi, to return her to house arrest, or worse, to incarcerate her in Insean prison. It is a measure of the fear of the dictatorship. It is a measure of the success of Aung San Suu Kyi. It is a measure of success of all of you around the world democracy and human rights and freedom in Burma. It is a measure of where we are going now. We have another 18 months to the election. We have another 12 months to AUNG SAN SUU KYI's next birthday. If ever there was a moment in history where people who believe in democracy, where people who believe in human rights have an obligation to stand up and say it is not good enough to have 2,155 Burmese as held as political prisoners. It's not good enough to have the leading voice of democracy condemned by a show trial to probably another 5 years in jail. It's not good enough to run an election where the outcome is already known, and even if it weren't, the Burmese military can be guaranteed to not produce the right result. This is the time when everybody has to put their shoulder to the wheel and say there will be democracy in Burma, there will be human rights in Burma, there will be national reconciliation. Every one of you has been vocal on Burma, but it's time that it's more than just the Burmese community. It's time that it's more than just a few supporters of the Burmese around the world. It's time those voices join together with President Barack Obama, with Prime Minister Gordon Brown of the United Kingdom, with Prime Minister Rudd of Australia. They have the obligation to say to the Burmese military, this is not acceptable, this is the time for change, this is the time for democracy. And the first and most important step is that those 2,155 prisoners held in appalling conditions, conditions that people like me cannot even imagine how bad they are. Those people must be freed from jail immediately. The world has to send a message to Burma now. There is no time left for the Burmese military. They must release those prisoners. They must abandon the roadmap to democracy. Because it's not a roadmap to democracy, it is a roadblock to democracy. It is a constitution that violates every understood principle of natural justice and democracy. It is a constitution that mocks democracy, mocks the people of Burma, and mocks the people of the world. Stand at the crossroads for Burma. Let me give you this commitment from myself and from my party, the Greens, and from my organisation, the Australian Coalition for Democracy in Burma. But I give this commitment on behalf of everybody in Australia and everybody outside of Burma who cares about freedom and human rights. We will not rest until we see the military dictatorship overthrown. We will not rest until we see Aung San Suu Kyi free and part of the political processes of Burma. We will not rest until there is democracy and human rights in Burma. Thank you very much for